This video is supported by patrons like you. If you'd like to become a patron, please head over to patreon.com/Matt Jarbo. What a night it has been. What an absolute crazy whirlwind night it has been. Today, we've seen a whole bunch of odd Star Wars news, right? First, you had the rumor coming out that Kylo Ren is going to be possibly getting his own Disney Plus prequel series. Then you find out that Lawrence Kasdan looks at Lucasfilm and went like, you guys up Solo, it's not me, it's you, man. But he calls out Solo and says that Solo was not his fault specifically, and that the studio blew, which I think a lot of people out there are very much in agreement with. They very much believe that Solo bombed and it was Kathleen Kennedy's fault, hence why so many people wanted her fired after all that went down. But here it is, a year and a half after that, and again, the craziest news just broke here, because the Benioff and Weiss Star Wars Trilogy is not moving forward. This just happened a little bit ago, and this is wild stuff because it was over a year ago that Benioff and Weiss were announced as taking over Star Wars, as working on a new, it wasn't even originally said as a trilogy, it was said as a series of films. I anticipated, or I estimated, at least 5 movies setting up a massive arc. You even heard certain things, like there were rumors that they were talking about the Old Republic, which made old school BioWare KOTOR fans like me pop our nipples up and just go, I'm sorry, what now? What? We're gonna KOTOR? Revan? What? Is basically how a lot of us felt. Then, of course, Game of Thrones Season 8 came out, and while I enjoyed it immensely and feel satisfied with the ending, a lot of you out there didn't, and that is okay. But many people questioned whether or not this was going to have any significant impact on these guys were going forward at Star Wars, and apparently it had none right off the bat. So let's find out more. So Game of Thrones showrunners DB Weiss and David Benioff are no longer working on the new Star Wars trilogy, according to Deadline. They cited their historic deal with Netflix and explained that their enthusiasm for Star Wars remains boundless, but regrettably, their schedule is full up. And the thing is, their deal with Netflix here is actually really massive. So their deal with Netflix is the deal is valued at $200 million. That's right. Let's all Dr. Evil it, right? 200 million. And this is for a 5-year deal at Netflix. And this is coming off of WB dropping 500 million for 5 years for JJ Abrams to go over there. So these companies, right, especially with WB doing the HBO Max, right, their whole thing, their streaming platform, and Netflix wanting these guys, there's a lot of money at play. And I don't think Lucasfilm really could come in and really deal with that. I don't think they could. I think that they really just Netflix outbid the House of Mouse, and that is significant. They said here, we love Star Wars. When George Lucas built it, he built us too. Getting to talk about Star Wars with him and the current Star Wars team was the thrill of a lifetime. We will always be indebted to the saga that changed everything. There are only so many hours in the day, and we felt that we could not do justice to both Star Wars and our Netflix projects, so we are regrettably stepping away. Like I said, $200 million from Netflix. Do you really think that Disney was going to pay out $200 million? No. So they took the better deal, and it's possible that the popularity off of them signing for Star Wars, as well as the hype leading up to Game of Thrones, is what prompted them to have Netflix pay out that kind of cash. And here's the biggest thing. Make no mistake, Netflix and Disney are in competition with one another. By the time that Netflix paid out the 200 million, or offered up the 200 million for this deal, they've already known that Dan and Dave were going to be working for Lucasfilm, and i.e. Bob Iger. So they kind of poached them, in my opinion, by offering them a much more splendid deal. But Kathleen Kennedy chose to say optimistic in her statement, leaving room for Benioff and Weiss to come back, which they will one day. She says here that Benioff and Weiss are incredible storytellers. We hope to include them in a journey forward when they are able to step away from their busy schedule to focus on Star Wars. And that's a solid thing, right? That's now here's the thing is when Kathleen Kennedy, when they finally get around to being done with Netflix, Kathleen Kennedy ain't going to be there. I think we all can agree with that, right? But there might be a couple other things that maybe popped up a little bit. Just recently, we see here that Joker scores in October 2nd. This is from a couple weeks ago, from the week after Joker, where Joker scored another record-breaking opening weekend, and Gemini Man bombed. Now, Gemini Man was a movie that people thought was going to do quite well. You have Ang Lee directing Will Smith fighting himself. You figured it would have been something that would have been massive and spectacular and fantastic, and it would have been mind-bending in the 120 frames per second. The high frame rate. Because, gamers love 60 FPS. Doesn't really translate well, and most theaters couldn't even support it. But the reason why that's important here is that David Benioff wrote Gemini Man, and the plot from what I read about some of the scripting was maybe necessarily not the best. Now you got to remember that Benioff also wrote X-Men Origins Wolverine. So when it comes to writing scripts, he doesn't necessarily have the greatest track record. However, working on something like Game of Thrones would have given them a lot of just in the field experience to craft great stories, considering that up until season 8 of Game of Thrones, they were considered amazing for their writing. But they actually admit, and this just happened the other day, Game of Thrones creators chose a weird time to confirm they had no idea what they're doing. And they did. They were at a fan panel over the weekend, and he says, everything we could make a mistake in, we did. But that's just, in essence, that's how filmmaking goes. Everything you can make a mistake in, you make. You learn as you go. That's just kind of how the game is played. But these guys admit that they didn't even have a lot of experience before HBO bought the deal. And in fact, this woman here, Needle and Pen, or for Arya, live tweeted the event. We can see here she is at the Austin Film Festival. Here's the Dan and Dave right there, and they're talking about everything, And so she's talking. So she says here that someone. Oh, she says here. Dan is saying that writers and source material end up in divorce, and that the divorce is amicable since they ran out of material, therefore kind of talking about what happened with Game of Thrones. They're talking about their pitch and how nervous they were. They pitched it to Carolyn Strauss, who had a reputation of being a tough pitch. They were nervous because of how bad they wanted to do Game of Thrones. But David is describing the pre-meeting with George, who was questioning their bona fides, and we really didn't have any. We'd never done TV, and we didn't have any. We don't know why he trusted us with his life's work. He did, but they're basically saying here that they didn't have any experience going into Game of Thrones. And there was a couple things here, even talking about like the dismal pilot, which everything we could do, we could make a mistake in, and we did, because remember, they shot the pilot. The pilot was pretty terrible. But he says here that Game of Thrones was basically an expensive film school for Dave. For example, they had no idea how to work with costume designers. It was a huge learning experience. So a lot of what they're talking about here is that they learned on the go. And whatever they feel they learned off of Game of Thrones, clearly Netflix has opted to pay for. That's what I'm trying to get through here, is that clearly Netflix has opted to pay for this, but it may not have actually been a really good fit for Star Wars. But then again, Kathleen Kennedy allowed Rian Johnson to kind of run rampant with The Last Jedi, so anything is possible. Speaking of that, is Rian Johnson's trilogy still happening? Because at this point, none of the other information matters. Dan and Dave they still have $200 million. They're still very happy. But the question then becomes, what's going to happen with Rian Johnson's trilogy? What's going to happen with that? Is he still going to make it? Is it going to happen now? If I had to guess, if I had to bet, if I had to, I would say yes. Let me explain. I don't want it. You don't want it, clearly. But what we have here is a situation where he was announced 2 years ago that he was going to be getting a trilogy of films. People have been asking him about it almost nonstop, every interview for 2 years, whether or not he's going to be doing this trilogy. He couldn't confirm it a couple weeks ago. He didn't know what was happening. Disney was still figuring it out, leading many of us to believe that it was done, that it was dead, that it was over, that we were free from Johnson's wrath on Star Wars. But then this happens. And now they have to scramble. They have 3 years to get a movie done. That's a long time, and they could easily do it. But Disney is not a small studio. They are a massive, massive, massive conglomerate. In every single country in this world, they have some kind of foothold, and everything operates within itself. And they cross promote constantly within itself. So they need something to work. And if Johnson's been working on this trilogy for 2 years, then that beady-eyed little bastard is probably going to already have scripts done. Now, we know that Knives Out is what he's working on now, and that's going to be coming out here pretty soon. And the success off of that, which the reviews from critics have been very high. Even Andy Signor, who's a friend of mine, saw it, I guess, the other day, and he's kind of speaking relatively highly of it from what I could gather. That movie, if it's successful, could then prompt Kathleen Kennedy to ring up old Rian and give him the keys to the kingdom to ruin something once again. I don't want it. You certainly don't want it. And I don't know. I think that it's entirely possible that Rian Johnson could get another trilogy. God, I don't want that. Just thinking about it, it's like, no. More Admiral Hodo. More Rose Tico. A Rose Tico trilogy. No, Rose. No, Rose. No. But that's where we are. Or they could do the right thing. They could seize the opportunity to do the right thing, which would be to just immediately turn over and go, hey, yo, Dave, what's going on with that hat? You still want to wear that director's hat? How'd you like directing a couple episodes of The Mandalorian? How'd you enjoy that, buddy? Did you like working in the live space? The audience seemed to like it because he directed the pilot. I think that in episode 5. They could finally give Filoni the chance to work in the live action space. Clone Wars is wrapping up in February with season 7 or season 6. I forget. Star Wars Resistance, which was his show, and he was pulled off of that to go work on Clone Wars. That's wrapping up at the end of this year. They're done. There's no more animated stuff on the horizon that I can think of right now. He's currently balls deep in season 2 of The Mandalorian. Why not tap him? Finally tap him. Finally knight Filoni. Walk in there with the lightsaber. Won't rise, Sir Filoni, Jedi Master, or whatever the hell you want to say. But anoint Filoni. Put him in charge of it. Give him a trilogy. See what he comes up with. Because I guarantee you it'd be something related to Thrawn or in the EU or something. Something. That's what they need to do now. No Rian Johnson. The fans won't take it. I get called a shill constantly. I've been really supportive of Star Wars like this fall. You bring Rian Johnson back and you'll lose me. I don't want to take down that Millennium Falcon rug because I love that thing. Or my wooden wall art from a couple years ago that I like too. But you will lose me as a fan if you put in Rian Johnson. 100%. Because that's not where fans want. That's not what's going to be popular. But this could also be Kevin Feige's time to step up too. Because we already know he was working on something. He could be 2022. That could be the other side of it. But just imagine Filoni. I just want Filoni, man. I want someone who... Feige is a diehard fan. But I want someone like Filoni in there. I think him behind the director's camera, writing the script, directing the movie would give us the purest example of post-Lucas Star Wars would come from him. And then to have him lead the story group, take over creative duties for Star Wars, and just guide it to greener pastures. I may be putting too much on the dude, but I know so many of you watching this right now absolutely fundamentally want that. And we might actually be given the opportunity to experience it, which makes me as a Star Wars fan extremely happy. So at the end of the day, to wrap this whole little segment up, yeah, maybe it's a good thing Dan and Dave got let go or they decided to quit, because we could get something 100 million times better, and that's great, and I'll take it.